Little bit about Afshin. Afshin Sepehri is the producer of the audiobook, The Stories of Shahnameh. He has a passion for Persian literature, especially the Shahnameh, the Persian epic by Ferdowsi, and has had several lectures and storytelling sessions on the topic over the years. He's the co-founder and director of Radio College Park, the longest-running Persian podcast, and a member of the advisory board of the Persian and Iranian Studies at the University of Washington. He has been president of the Zoroastrian Society of Washington State and co-founder and president of the Iranian Graduate Student Foundation at the University of Maryland. Afshin has a PhD in electrical and computer engineering and works as a senior software engineer. Now, Nusha. Nusha is 10 years old. She was born in 2004 and raised in the United States. Both her parents are Zoroastrians and Iranians, and they have encouraged her to learn about the Persian culture and language since she was very young. Nusha speaks, reads, and writes in both English and Persian. She had produced the audiobook, The Stories of Shahnameh, in English. I will give Afshin and Nusha the floor to tell us the story about Shahnameh.
Thank you, Mahrukh, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. I know that it's early in the morning, so I'm glad that you could make it. I hope you enjoy the storytelling session that we are having on Shahnameh this morning. But before starting the story, let me just tell you briefly about Shahnameh and also about the project that Nusha and I have worked on. As many of you, I'm sure, know about it, Shahnameh is a great poetry book written by a great poet named Ferdowsi over 1,000 years ago. In this book, Ferdowsi tells the story of ancient kings of Iran and the heroes of their army. It has the story of almost 50 different kings from very beginning of time, from the first king whose name was Qumars, all the way to the time that Iranians were defeated by Arabs and a new era began in the history of Iran. So Shahnameh is very important for both Iranians and also for other nations, other people who come from the same root, including Parsis, who also share the same heritage before they migrated to India.
So can we ask questions as we go along?
Yeah, I think that we are going to just have a question and answer outside because we are going to tell you a long story and I hope that we can fit it in this time. So I'm sure that many of you know much more about Shahnameh. All I want to tell you about is that Shahnameh is very important to all of us, and it had great roles and crucial roles in basically keeping the language, Persian language, alive, and also telling us the stories from our past and keep them alive as well. So we are all proud of Shahnameh. We try to just tell the stories of Shahnameh for our kids, as I did to my daughter. And as a result of these conversations that we have and the fascination that she had with those stories, we decided to create an audiobook on Shahnameh. We created these audiobooks in both Persian and English, telling the stories of Shahnameh from the very first king all the way, and we are obviously just in the beginning. So we have produced the first CD, which has the story of the first 6 kings of Shahnameh and the early civilizations. After this session, you will have the chance to purchase these CDs outside if you want. But for today, we are going to tell you a story from our second CD. So it's a story that starts at the era of King Manucher. Manucher was a king of Iran after his grandfather Feridun. And the story that we are telling you about is the story of an important family in Shahnameh, the family of Sam of Nariman, and his son and his grandson that you all know about. But I hope you enjoyed the story that we are going to tell you.
Once upon a time, there was a good king named Mahrukh. Mahrukh had many great warriors who were known as heroes. One of these heroes was named Sam. This is the story of Sam and his family. Sam had no children until his wife became pregnant and gave birth to a baby boy. The child's face was as bright as the sun, but he had white hair. When Sam saw his child, he became disappointed and faced the heavens and said, "Oh God, why have you given me such a child? If I have done anything wrong, please forgive me. Is he a devil or an angel? I cannot live with the shame of having such a child." So he ordered for his soldiers to take the child into the mountains and to leave him there. On top of the mountain lived a big bird named Seymour. Seymour had a chick, and when her chick got hungry, she went and hunted food for it. Seymour saw the crying baby on the rock and swooped down and with her claws snatched it up and flew off to feed it to her chick. But at that moment, God blessed the child, and Seymour and her chick felt sorry for it. So instead of eating it, they decided to feed and raise it. Years passed, and the baby grew into a tall and strong man. One night, back at the palace, Sam had a dream. In his dream, a man from India came to him and gave him news about his child. When Sam woke up, he gathered his companions and told them his dream. His companions said to him, "You did not do the right thing, leaving your innocent child in the mountains to die. Even the animals take care of their young. Go and beg God for forgiveness." The next day, Sam had another dream. In his dream, his son came to him with 2 wise men at his side and an entire army behind him. In his dream, one of the wise men came to him and started scolding him. He said, "What kind of hero are you, leaving your innocent son in the mountains to die? What is wrong with white hair? You yourself have white hair." Sam woke up and screamed. He gathered his army and set off towards the mountains. At the base of the mountain, Sam looked up at Seymour's nest and then put his face to the ground and begged God for forgiveness and for his child back. Seymour saw this entire scene and went to the boy and told him, "Your father Sam, a great hero, has regretted what he has done to you and has come to take you back." The boy said, "But I like it here. Have you become tired of me?" But Seymour said, "I am certain that if you saw your father's palace, you would love it much more than my nest. So go and try it. If you ever want to return, set one of the feathers that I will give you on fire, and I will immediately come and take you back here." This way, Seymour convinced the boy, and she took him down to Sam. When Sam saw his beautiful son with his long white hair, he started crying. He praised Seymour, then turned to his son and telling him, "My son, I have been bad with you, so please forgive me and forget the past. I swear to God that from this day on, I will never hurt you again, and I will try to grant your every wish." Then Sam named his son Zal. Then father and son and army went down from the mountains and back to their city, Zabulistan. The people of the city greeted them when they returned and celebrated. That night, Sam gathered the wise people and told them, "Under orders of the king, I must go to Gorg-Saran and Mazandaran. Please take care of Zal, for he is as precious to me as my life." Then Sam turned to Zal and told him, "I have to go away for a long time. Zabulistan is your home, and all the people here are at your service, and all my riches are yours. Gather the wise people and scientists around you and learn as much as you can about the sciences." Zal agreed, and Sam left. And Zal accompanied him part of the way, then returned to Zabulistan. As his father had advised, Zal gathered the wise people and scientists and learned as much as he could from them. And soon he himself became a unique and noble man.
Time passed, and one day, Zal decided to go on a trip around the area under his rule. So he gathered some of his closest subjects, and they went toward India and the city of Kabul. Near the city, they found a nice place near a meadow, and they put a camp in there and just stayed there. The king of Kabul, named Mehrab, heard about Zal. Mehrab was a noble, rich man, but he was a descendant of Zahak, a former evil king who was defeated by Feridun, grandfather of King Manucher. Every year, Mehrab sent some presents to Sam to avoid any conflict between them and keep peace. When he heard about Zal, he gathered some presents and went to meet Zal. Zal greeted him, and the two went in the tent and had a feast together. When Mehrab left, Zal told his companions, "This Mehrab seems like a nice gentleman." And one of the companions said, "You should see his daughter. She's very pretty." And then he continued telling about her eye, lips, and hair, so that Zal, without seeing her, became fond of her. The next day, Mehrab went to see Zal again. They had a breakfast, and then Zal asked Mehrab, "What do you want from me?" And Mehrab said, "I have only one wish, and that is for you to come and be my guest in my palace." Zal said, "I'm sorry, but I cannot accept your invitation because my father will not approve of it. You are a descendant of Zahak." Mehrab was disappointed, but he didn't say anything, and he just walked away. But just seeing Mehrab once again, Zal remembered of his daughter, and he fell in love. Mehrab returned to his palace and was greeted by his wife, Sindukht, and his daughter, Rudabe. Okay. So that's fine. Mehrab was greeted by his wife and his daughter. His wife, Sindukht, asked him, "What kind of a person is Zal, son of Sam? Is he like a human being or not? I've heard that he has white hair." And Mehrab said, "There is no hero greater than Zal in the world. He's a very good horseman. He's very brave. And his only flaw is his white hair, but that is also beautiful. And people are negative about it for no good reason." Hearing description of Zal, Rudabe, Mehrab's daughter, fell in love with him. And she lost her sleep and appetite and wanted to meet him.
Rudabe had 5 maids who served her. Rudabe told her maids her secret about Sam's son and how she longed to see him. She wanted her maids to find a solution to her problem. Her maids became worried and said to Rudabe, "Oh, princess, people from India to China admire your beauty, and you want to embrace someone who insulted your father, and especially who was born old and was raised by a bird." With these words, Rudabe became angry and said, "What nonsense are you saying? I do not want any important man from India, China, or Rome. The only one who is worthy of me is Zal, whether you call him old or young. Without even seeing him, I've become fond of him. I do not care about his appearance. His spirit is appealing to me." When Rudabe's maids saw how deeply in love she was, they said to her, "Oh, princess, we are your servants and will do whatever we can to make you two together."
The maids went to the meadow next to the place that Zal was camping. They started picking flowers. Zal spotted them and asked one of the companions, "Who are these girls?" And the answer was, "These are the maids of Princess Rudabe, Princess of Kabul." Then Zal grabbed his bow and arrow and pointed it at a flying bird and released it. He hit the bird and it fell. He asked one of the servants to fetch the bird. The servant went over there and then was met by the maids. One of the maids said, "Who is that guy who made that shot very well?" And the answer was, "Watch your mouth. The person you're talking about is the son of the great hero Sam, and he's the bravest hero in the entire world." And the maid said, "Don't brag about your master, because Mahrukh is also a great king, and he has a very beautiful daughter who is superior to your master." And then the other maids joined her, and they talked about praised Rudabe. And then the servant laughed and said, "The way you talk, it seems that your princess and my master belong together." And then, laughing, he returned to Zal. Zal said, "What kind of conversation did you have with those girls that you're laughing?" And then he said about it, and Zal said, "Go tell them to wait and just take some jewelry with them to the palace, along with a message from me." When maids heard about that, they said, "Ask Zal to give us the message in person, otherwise it wouldn't be kept secret." So Zal met the girls, and they praised him and his father. And Zal said, "Tell me about your princess." And then they started praising Rudabe, her beauty, and they said, "Rudabe is like a gem, and she looks like a moon," and so on. And then Zal said, "Without seeing your princess, I have fallen in love with her. Please let me know how I can visit her." And they said, "Okay, we can return to the palace and talk about you to her and make her eager to see you as well. At nighttime, you grab a rope and come next to the wall of the palace, and then we will arrange for you to meet."
Rudabe's maids hurried home and handed Rudabe her gifts. Then they explained how much they admired Zal. His muscular body and his white hair was a flaw, but it was not important according to them. They wanted. Rudabe said to them, "You who made fun of him now are fond of him." Then she smiled, and then, with the help of her maids, filled the house with flowers and fragrances.
When night fell, Zal went next to the next to the palace, and then Rudabe went to the rooftop. Seeing her on top, who was shining like a gem, Zal said, "Oh, gorgeous lady who looked like a moon, the greeting of the heavens on you and my regards."
Rudabe responded, "O noble man, welcome, bless you."
And then Zal said, "Why are we talking while you are up there and I'm down here? Please let me know how I can come closer."
So Rudabe untied her long black hair and tossed it down from the roof. And then she said, "Grasp my black hair and make your way up."
Zal was amazed by that beautiful hair and said, "That's not right. God forbid that I ever do such a terrible thing." And then he tossed his rope up there and then climbed up on the roof. So facing each other, the two took each other's hand and then climbed down the rooftop into the room that Rudabe had decorated. They embraced each other, and Zal said, "Oh, gorgeous, I know that my father and King Manucher will not approve our marriage, but I cannot let you go. I will beg God that maybe someday their hatred will be purified and you and I can get legally married."
Rudabe responded, "I also swear to the Lord that I will not accept anyone else as my husband except Zal, the great hero."
So the two had a conversation and until dawn, and then Zal returned, climbed down the rope and returned home. The next day, Zal wrote a letter to his father explaining his love to Rudabe. He said, "Well, everybody knew me as great hero Sam's son, while you were sitting on a throne and I was living in Seymour's nest. But that was my destiny. I remember that you told me that when you returned me from mountain, you told me that you will grant every wish that I have. Now, this is my wish." When Sam received the letter, he read it and he was upset. He said, I should have expected such a thing from someone who was raised by a wild bird. But then he thought to himself, if I object, then I break the promise that I've given him. But if I agree, I don't know what kind of child would be born from a descendant of an evil and someone who was raised by a bird. So not knowing what to do, he decided to get help from astrologers and fortune tellers. He asked them to go and investigate what kind of child will be born and what would be the outcome of this marriage. The fortune tellers went and studied the stars and then returned with the good news. They said, the outcome is bright. A child will be born from these two that would be a great hero. He would be very strong and would be the support of the king of Iran and the people of Iran. Sam was happy and decided to go and ask King Manucher for permission. But the news of love between Zal and Rudabe reached King Manucher sooner, and he was upset. He was actually angry. He said, I worked so hard to purify the world from evil souls. My grandfather Feridun defeated Zahak, but now I don't know what's going to happen if these two get married. What kind of child will be born? And what happens if he wants to lean on his mother's side and he crave the throne and the crown? So when Sam arrived, he was so angry that he did not let Sam to speak. He said, grab an army, go to the Kabul and destroy the entire city, burn it down, and kill Mehrab and anyone else who is a descendant of Zahak. Sam said, I will do whatever kings ask of me. I will make you happy. So he gathered an army and went toward Kabul. Zal heard about his father coming with an army. He said, if my father wants to destroy Kabul, he needs to kill me first. So he went to meet his father. He kissed the ground and he said, "Oh, great hero, be happy because you are wise and strong. Everybody's happy from you, great hero, except me, your son. You left me in the mountains when I was just a baby. And now that I'm happy, again you have returned to ruin my life. If you want to go and destroy Kabul, you have to kill me first. Please do not do that. I beg you. You promised to give me every wish that I have, and this is the only wish that I have." Hearing this, Sam felt ashamed. He looked down and said, "My son, you're right. I did bad to you, and I would like to fix it. I would like to solve this problem. So this is what I'm going to do. I will write a letter to King Manucher and give it to you. You go and deliver the message in person and talk to the king and convince him." So he writes a letter. Zal get the letter and start out toward the capital and the palace.
Mehrab and Sindukht soon found about Rudabeh's love and about Sam's army. Mehrab became angry and said to Sindukht, "I do not have enough energy to fight with the king of the world. So I have to kill you and your daughter, and hopefully I will be able to calm down the angry king." When hearing these words, Sindukht became frightened. Then she thought of a plan. She said to Mehrab, "I have a plan to go and talk to Sam, and I will try to convince him to not fight with Kabul, and I will take him many gifts." Mehrab was not optimistic with this idea, but agreed. So Sindukht gathered presents and gifts and set off towards Sam's camp. When she got to their camp, she kissed the ground before Sam and blessed him with the gifts.
Sam looked at all the presents and thought to himself, "For a king as rich as Mehrab, why has he chosen a woman as a messenger?"
Sindukht said, "O king, if Mehrab, the king of Kabul, has done anything wrong, why should the people of Kabul suffer?"
So Sam told Sindukht, "I will ask you something and I want you to answer me honestly. Who are you and what relationship do you have with Mehrab? And also, if you know his daughter, tell me about her. Tell me about her beauty and also about her wisdom and her spirit, so I know how worthy she is."
Sindukht said, "Before I reply, I want you to promise not to harm me or my family." Sam took Sindukht's hand and promised. Sindukht kissed the ground again and then said to Sam, "O great hero, I am Mehrab's wife, Rudabeh's mother, and a relative of Zahak. Tell me, I am here before you, and you can kill me if you want, but please do not harm the innocent people of Kabul."
Hearing that Sindukht was Mehrab's wife, Sam was surprised. But he said, "Okay, I'll stick to my promise. I do not hurt you or your family. Going to Kabul and just be in peace with your family. I do not even object to the marriage of my son with your daughter. In fact, I have sent my son, Zal, directly to King Manucher to talk to him, and I hope that he can convince him to agree with this marriage. So Sindokh was happy, and then she returned back to Kabul. Zal went to the palace and saw the king and showed respect and kissed the ground and gave him the letter that his father Sam had written. The king read the letter and told Zal, I'm upset about the letter that your father has written, but I want to do something to make you happy. So give me some time. I want to consult with others and give you an answer. After Zal left, the king called for all the wise men and asked them to go and investigate what would be the outcome of this marriage. So the fortune tellers, the astrologers, they all went and studied the stars for 3 days. On the 4th day, they returned and gave the good news. The outcome of this marriage will be bright. A hero will be born from these two, who will be a great hero, who will be the pride of the country. He will be support of the king. He will be as strong as an elephant, and we will kill all the enemies of Iran, and the enemies will suffer from him. The king was happy, but told them not to tell anyone what you just told me. And then he asked for Zal to come and wanted the wise men to test him. The wise men came up with a set of questions and puzzles. Very hard questions, and they asked Zal, and Zal answered them all correctly. Just one thing to tell you here. So these questions and answers are very beautiful, and I highly recommend you to just read the book or listen to our CD. So the entire question and answers with the longer version of this story are in our next CD, and I recommend that you listen to it. But we do not have time, so I'll skip that part. So when Zal answered all the questions, the king was happy, and Zal said, then can I return back to Zabulistan? I have missed my father. The king smiled and said, I know that you haven't missed your old father. You have missed the daughter of Mehrab, but you have to wait for 1 more day. Then he ordered for a field to be set up so the knights can go and just fight and compete. So Zal went there and just showed off his strength and amazed everyone. Everyone said, good for Sam for having such a brave son. So the king said, I thought so hard about this and decided that from someone who is like a lion, no child will be born but a lion. So he wrote a letter back to Sam with approval of this marriage. So Zal returned back to his father Sam. Father and son hugged each other, and Zal told him about his journey and what happened between him and the king. In return, Sam told him about Sindokh's visit, and that she had invited them to go and visit Kabul. Father and son, with their army, went toward Kabul. Mehrab heard about it. He was happy, and the people of the city celebrated, and they welcomed them. When Mehrab met Zal and Sam, he hugged Sam and just put a golden crown on Zal's head, and then they went inside the city.
Sindokh, along with her 300 servants, brought them many jewels and fragrances.
When Sam saw Sindokh, he smiled and said, how much longer would you like to hide your daughter?
Sindokh smiled back and said, before you see the bride, you must first bless her with gifts.
And then Sam said, okay, ask for whatever you wish. And with that conversation, they all entered the palace. Sam looked at Rudabe and he gasped. He became speechless, not knowing how to describe her beauty. Then he asked Mahrukh to come forward, and the two together performed the traditional ceremony of engagement between Zal and Rudabe. Everybody celebrated in Kabul for a month, and then they moved to Zabul and celebrated there as well. Then after a while, some wrote a document and transferred the ruling power over Zabul and Kabul to his son, Zal. And then he himself, under the order of the king, moved toward Mazandaran and Gorsaran. This was the end of the story of Zal and Rudabe. So, thank you very much for your attention. Just before finishing, let me just add a few more things. One thing is Shahnameh does not end here, and the next story is also as beautiful, the story of the birth of the child which was promised. And that child is someone that everybody knows. His name is Rostam, the greatest hero of Shahnameh, the most important character in Shahnameh. And the story of birth of Rostam, along with a longer version of this story, is in the second CD of the stories of Shahnameh, which will be ready in a couple of months in both English and Persian. The Persian part will be my voice, and the English part will be Nusha's. But today, you can have the first CD here. After this session, outside you can purchase these two CDs in Persian and English, which is about the stories of the first 6 kings of Shahnameh, from Qumars to Feridun. I hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
Hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you, Afshin. Thank you, Nusha. I hope this is the beginning of a lot more stories to come. We really look forward to it. Thank you, and thank you for coming this early in the morning. Thank you, Afshin. Something for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.